The lost hope. The wind howled across the barren landscape, carrying with it the whispers of a world long forgotten. Ruins of once grand structures stood like broken skeletons, their skeletal frames casting long shadows in the dim light of a dying sun. Amidst the wreckage, a lone figure stumbled, her steps heavy with the weight of despair. Her name was Naya, and she was the last of her kind, the last of a race that had once known prosperity, power, and unity. But now, her people were gone, lost. To war, betrayal, and the slow decay of their world, Nia was abandoned on this dying planet, left to wither away alone in the ruins of a civilization that had once been glorious. The cold winds cut through her tattered clothes, and she pulled her coat tighter around her fragile frame. Her body ached, from hunger, from the exhaustion of days spent wandering aimlessly. Her eyes were dull, her face gaunt, and her heart heavy with the weight of hopelessness. Every step she took felt like a surrender, a slow march towards her inevitable end. For days she had wandered, searching for something, anything that might offer her a glimpse of salvation. But the world around her offered nothing but desolation. The cities were empty, the forests were dead, and the skies above were a constant swirling gray. Even the once bustling markets, where laughter and music had once filled the air, were now silent and cold. Nia had given up. She had no more strength to fight. Her people had betrayed her, and the world had forsaken her. She had no family, no friends, no allies, just the endless stretch of empty land mocking her existence. She had once been a warrior, a proud protector of her people. But now, that seemed like a distant memory, a life that no longer mattered. The fire that had once burned bright within her had been extinguished, replaced by a deep, unrelenting sorrow. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Nia collapsed onto the cold ground. She didn't care anymore. She had no more fight left in her. She closed her eyes, her body trembling from both the cold and the hopelessness that filled her heart. She wished for nothing more than to slip away, to fade into nothingness. But just as the darkness began to claim her, a strange warmth filled the air. Naya's breath caught in her throat as a soft light flickered in the distance, far off in the horizon. It was small at first, almost like a star in the sky, but it grew brighter with each passing second. She squinted, wondering if her mind was playing tricks on her. Was it a mirage, or was it real? Her heart pounded in her chest as she struggled to rise to her feet, her limbs trembling with the effort. She took a step, then another, her eyes fixed on the light. It was real. She could feel it now. The warmth, the promise of something more. With every step, the light grew stronger, more defined. Or it wasn't the sun, it was something else. Something alive. A spark of hope, however small, flickered inside her chest. She didn't know why, but something urged her to follow it. Something told her that this was not the end. Not yet. The light was her last chance, her final opportunity to escape the crushing weight of her solitude. The ground beneath her was rough, but Nia pressed on, each step a little easier than the last. The light called to her, beckoning her forward. She was no longer sure of what lay ahead, but she knew she couldn't stop. Not now. Her breath came faster as she neared the source of the light, and her pulse quickened with both excitement and fear. She was closer now, so close she could almost reach out and touch it. And then, as she rounded a corner, she saw it. A figure, standing tall against the glowing light, a man. His face was hidden in the shadows, but the outline of his form was unmistakable. He was real. He wasn't a figment of her imagination or a trick of the light. Her heart skipped a beat. He had arrived. Naya froze, her eyes locked on the figure before her. She didn't know who he was or what he wanted, but in that moment, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. For the first time in what felt like forever, Nia allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to face the darkness alone. The unexpected arrival. The man stood motionless in front of her, his silhouette sharp against the eerie glow that surrounded him. Nia's heart raced. each beat echoing in the silence of the desolate world around her. The strange warmth she had felt earlier seemed to radiate from him, pulling her closer despite the deep skepticism that tugged at her mind. He wasn't like the others. Not like the hunters who had once chased her, or the cruel conquerors who had devastated her people. There was no malice in his presence, no promise of harm. But could she trust him? Could she afford to trust anyone after everything that had happened? Nia's feet seemed to move on their own, slowly approaching him, each step a careful decision weighed with uncertainty. Her instincts screamed to be cautious. She had survived this long because of her wariness, her ability to stay distant, to never get too close to anyone. But the warmth in his presence and the way he seemed to stand in perfect defiance of the cold world around her made something inside her stir, something long buried in the wreckage of her heart. The man's eyes were hidden beneath a hood, casting a shadow over his features, but the outline of his face looked human. His clothes were unlike anything she had seen before, dark, functional, with markings she couldn't place, but somehow familiar in their own strange way. He looked like he had walked through the same wasteland as her, yet there was no sign of weariness in him, no signs of struggle. When she was just a few feet away, he spoke. His voice was low, steady, with an odd calmness to it. "You don't need to be afraid." Her heart skipped a beat and she instinctively stepped back, instinctively raising her arms in a protective gesture. She couldn't help it. Her survival had always been tied to keeping a safe distance, and any sudden movement in her world had once been a threat. The man raised his hand slightly, palms open in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to harm you," he said. "I'm here to help." Nia stared at him, her lips pressed together in disbelief. Help? There had been no help for her. No one had come when her world crumbled, when she lost everything. The people she had once fought for had abandoned her without a second thought, and now this stranger appeared, claiming to offer assistance. How could she believe him? "I've been alone for so long," Nia muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. "There is no help. No one comes to save the broken." The man's expression softened, though his face remained hidden. "Sometimes help doesn't come in the form you expect. Sometimes it comes in the quiet moments, in the ones who refuse to give up, even when everything seems lost." Nia's breath caught in her throat. His words were so simple, yet they carried weight, a promise of something more. She could feel the truth of them even if she didn't want to. She had been holding on to her anger, her pain, so tightly that she hadn't realized how much she had longed for something, anything, to restore her faith in the world, in people. She studied the man, trying to read his intentions. His voice didn't sound like a trap, but how could she be sure? She had been deceived before, betrayed by the very ones who claimed to care for her. "Why?" she asked, her voice shaky. "Why me? Why come here? What do you want from me?" The man's shoulders tensed for a moment, as though he was preparing for a different kind of answer, but he remained calm. "I've seen what your people went through. I've seen the destruction. I'm here because I believe there is still something worth saving, and that starts with you." Nia's eyes widened at his words. She wasn't sure what he meant. Was he referring to her people, her planet, or something else entirely? She was, no longer sure what had been left to save, or if anything could be restored from the ashes of her once great civilization. "I'm not the last," she said, shaking her head. "There are no more. You came too late." The man took a step closer, and Nia instinctively braced herself. But this time the movement didn't feel threatening. He extended his hand slowly, as if offering a choice rather than a command. "There are still remnants," he said softly. "The world may be broken, but it's not beyond repair. I know you don't believe that now, but you don't have to face it alone anymore." Nia looked at his outstretched hand, then back at his face, hidden beneath the shadows of his hood. Something in her hesitated. Something in her fought against the idea of trusting another. But then, as she looked at the man, standing firm in the middle of the wasteland, a strange sense of calm washed over her. There was a truth in his words, a quiet strength that she hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time in what seemed Like forever, she felt a flicker of hope. Slowly, she reached out, and in that moment, Nia knew that her world was about to change. The first encounter, Nia's fingers brushed against the man's hand, and it was as if a spark of energy shot through her, igniting something deep inside. The warmth from his touch spread through her, a stark contrast to the coldness of the planet. She looked up, meeting his gaze for the first time. His eyes were a deep brown, warm and full of an unspoken understanding. They didn't seem to belong to this world, like they had seen things she couldn't even begin to imagine. For a moment, the world around them faded. The distant wind, the endless horizon, even the harsh reality of her desolation. It was just her and him, standing together in the stillness. The air seemed to shift, as if time itself held its breath. "What's your name?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. She hadn't spoken to anyone in so long. The sound of her own voice felt foreign, almost lost. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, then replied, "Liam." The name felt like a lifeline, a tether to something human, something real. Nia's heart beat faster, but she pushed down the surge of emotion that followed. She had been alone for too long to allow herself to care about anyone again. Liam didn't let go of her hand, but his grip was gentle, as though he knew how fragile she was. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" Nia's lips tightened. She didn't want to talk about her past, about the war, the betrayal, the way everything had slipped through her fingers. But his question hung in the air, and for the first time in ages she wanted to answer it. She wasn't sure if it was his calm presence or the unexpected gentleness in his voice, but something in her wanted to let him in. "I was part of a resistance," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We fought to protect my people, but they turned on us, the leaders, the generals. They didn't care anymore. They abandoned us. I was the last survivor." Liam didn't interrupt her, but his expression softened as he listened. He didn't pity her, didn't look at her like she was a broken thing. Instead, there was something more, something that made Nia feel like she wasn't as alone as she had been. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance for something more. "I'm sorry," he said after a moment. "But I believe you're not the last. Not yet." Her eyes narrowed, confused. "What do you mean?" Liam finally released her hand and stepped back, his eyes scanning the horizon before settling back on her. "There are others, survivors. I didn't come here by accident, I came to find you." Nia felt her breath catch in her throat. "Why? What do you want from me? My people are gone. I have nothing left to give." Liam took a deep breath, the kind of breath someone takes when they're about to reveal something important. "I'm not here for your people, Nia. I'm here because there's a future and you are part of it." Her heart skipped a beat, but she immediately shut it down. "You don't understand. My people are gone. You don't know what it's like. No one wants a broken warrior." "I know what it's like to lose everything," Liam replied, his voice low but firm. "And I know that you're not broken, Nia. You've survived. That means you're strong." Nia scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Survived? For what? To sit in this wasteland? To be reminded every day that I failed?" She shook, her head unable to look him in the eyes. "You don't get it." Liam didn't push her. Instead, he stood quietly for a moment, watching her as if he could see the war inside her. "I know this isn't easy," he said gently. "But I believe in you. I've seen your strength even when you can't see it yourself." Nia felt a strange tightness in her chest. No one had spoken to her like this in years. No one had believed in her, not even when she had fought for them. The world had given up on her long ago. But this man, this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere, was offering something she hadn't dared to hope for. "Why do you believe in me?" she asked, her voice raw. "Why me?" Liam smiled, but it wasn't a smile full of pity or condescension. It was one that said, "I see you for who you are." Because, Nia, you're not just a survivor. You're a warrior, and warriors don't just give up. For the first time in so long, Nia felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. It was small, almost too small to notice, but it was there. A quiet thought, a fragile dream that maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than what she had been through. Maybe there was something left to fight for. She looked at Liam, really looked at him for the first time. The man who had somehow found his way to her, who believed in her when she didn't believe in herself. He wasn't just offering her survival, he was offering her a chance to rebuild, to fight again, to stand tall. Her heart pounded in her chest, but this time, it was with a different kind of anticipation. The kind that came when you had nothing left to lose and the only option was to move forward. "I'm not sure I'm ready," she said quietly, unsure if she was speaking to him or to herself. Liam gave her a nod as though he had expected this. "You don't have to be ready, not yet. We'll take it one step at a time." For the first time in years, Nia didn't feel completely alone, and as they stood together, the wind began to die down, the weight of the world no longer pressing quite so heavily on her shoulders. Building trust, the days that followed felt like a slow, delicate awakening. The world around Nia remained the same, silent, barren, and broken. But something in her had shifted. With Liam by her side, she no longer felt like the last person, alive, waiting to fade into nothing. His presence, quiet and steady, had begun to mend the parts of her that had long been shattered. They traveled together, though Nia had no clear destination in mind. She followed him because it felt like the only thing worth doing. He didn't rush her or ask too much. He simply let her walk beside him, offering her food, water, and the occasional quiet word of encouragement. It was as if he understood the depths of her sorrow without needing to pry into it. Nia found herself looking at him in a way she hadn't expected. There was strength in his silence, a confidence that didn't demand attention but quietly commanded it. He didn't have to explain himself or tell her his reasons for being there. His actions spoke for him. He was a man of few words, but every word he said seemed to carry weight. It made her wonder who he was before all this, before the ruins and the endless night. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast long shadows over the desolate landscape, Liam stopped and turned to face her. They were sitting by a fire, a small but welcome warmth in the growing cold of the night. "You've been through a lot," Liam said, his voice breaking the silence that had lingered between them. "But I've noticed something about you." Nia looked up, surprised. He had been silent for most of their journey, and now, out of nowhere, he was speaking again. "What have you noticed?" He met her gaze, his eyes unwavering. "You're stronger than you realize, stronger than you think you can be." Nia felt a lump form in her throat, but she pushed it away. "I'm just surviving." "Surviving is the first step," he said. "But surviving alone isn't living. You're doing more than that. You're rebuilding yourself." She stared into the fire, trying to find the words to respond. She had never thought of herself as rebuilding. She'd always viewed herself as a broken piece of something that no longer existed. But with Liam's steady presence, a strange thought crept into her mind. What if she could rebuild? What if there was something worth fighting for again? For the first time, she felt a small sliver of hope, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time, but it was fragile and she didn't know if she could trust it. "You don't understand," Nia murmured. "I was supposed to protect them, my people. I failed. I couldn't save them. Now there's nothing left to save." Liam didn't respond immediately. He simply reached into his pack and pulled out a worn map. The corners were frayed, and the ink was faded, but the lines were still legible. He spread it out on the ground between them and pointed to a spot on it. "There are others out there," he said softly. "Others who need someone like you. Someone who's been through the worst and still stands." Nia looked at the map, her heart sinking. She had no desire to go searching for others. She didn't have the strength for that, but something in Liam's eyes made her pause. He wasn't asking her to lead them, wasn't asking her to be their savior. He was simply showing her that there were still people out there, still a need for those who had fought before. Nia exhaled, slowly, her mind racing. She had spent so long believing that there was nothing left for her. that there was no one left to protect. But the thought of being part of something again, of standing up for something greater than her own survival, stirred something deep within her. Maybe, just maybe, there was a purpose left for her, a reason to keep moving forward. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why do you believe in me?" Liam looked at her with a quiet, unwavering confidence. "Because I've seen it. You haven't given up even when everything has fallen apart. That's why you're more than just a survivor. You're a fighter," Nia wanted to argue. She wanted to push him away, tell him he was wrong, that she wasn't strong enough, that she had nothing left to give. But deep down she knew he was right. She had fought before, and maybe, just maybe, she could fight again. The silence stretched between them, but this time it didn't feel as heavy, feel as there was a shift, an unspoken understanding that passed between them. Nia wasn't sure where this path would lead, but for the first time, she wasn't alone. Liam had shown her that there was more to her than the broken woman she had become. There was something worth saving, something worth fighting for. As the fire crackled and the wind howled outside their small camp, Nia felt the stirrings of a new resolve deep inside her. She didn't know what the future held, but she was ready to face it. With Liam by her side, she no longer felt broken. She felt like she could begin to rebuild, step by step, piece by piece. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as lost as she thought. The revelation, the days bled into one another as Nia and Liam moved across the wasteland. The silence between them had grown comfortable, like two people sharing the same quiet space. Nia still struggled with the weight of her past, the memories of her people, her failures, and the constant feeling that the world had left her behind. But Liam had become her constant. He was a reminder that maybe, just maybe, there was still something worth fighting for. One morning, as they walked through the twisted remains of what was once a thriving city, Nia found herself wondering how long they could continue. How long before their hope would run out, just like everything else? But the light of the sun piercing through the gray clouds made her stop and turn to Liam. He had been strangely quiet all morning, his eyes distant, as though lost in thought. It wasn't like him. "Liam," she said, her voice breaking the silence. "What is it? You've been different lately." He paused, his hand resting on the edge of a ruined column as he glanced at her. His expression was unreadable. For the first time, there was something hidden behind his eyes, something he wasn't saying. Nia took a step closer, instinctively sensing that something was wrong. "What aren't you telling me?" Liam exhaled sharply and slowly turned to face her fully. His face, usually a calm mask, now held a weight to it that was impossible to ignore. "I haven't been entirely honest with you, Nia," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of years of unspoken truths. Nia's heart skipped a beat. The world around her seemed to shrink, the noise of the wind and the desolation fading as she focused entirely on him. "What do you mean?" Liam's gaze softened, but there was a deep sadness in his eyes. "I'm not just a wanderer. I didn't come here by accident." He hesitated for a moment, as if considering how much to reveal. "I'm not just here to help you. I'm here because you are part of something much bigger, something that I've been searching for." Nia took a step back, confused and unsure of what he was saying. "What do you mean? What do I have to do with anything?" Liam's eyes met hers, unwavering. "I'm not just a traveler, Nia. I'm part of a group that has been tracking the survivors of this war, people who survived the downfall of your civilization, and you're one of them." Nia's mind reeled. The words didn't make sense. How could she be one of them? She was just one broken soul wandering through a dead world. There was no greater cause for her, nothing left to protect, nothing worth saving. "I don't understand," she whispered, shaking her head. "I'm nobody. I'm just the last of my kind. My people, they're all gone." Liam stepped closer, his voice firm, but soft. You're not just anyone. You're the last of your kind, yes. But that's not the end. Your people's legacy isn't just their fall, it's what they fought for, Nia. It's you. Nia's breath caught in her throat. She had spent so long believing that her people's destruction had been the end of everything. Endless battles, betrayal, and the ultimate loss of everything she had ever known. How could she be the key to anything? You're the last of a race that was once powerful. You were once a warrior, a protector. And there are others. Those who survived in secret. They've been waiting for someone like you to lead them. Nia shook her head, trying to grasp what he was saying. No. Liam, there's nothing left. My people are gone. You don't know what it was like. There's nothing to rebuild, no one left to lead. Liam's hand gently grasped her arm, pulling her attention back to him. That's where you're wrong. There are survivors. Some of them have been hiding, others scattered. But they're out there. And they need you, Nia. They need you to show them that there's hope again. They need someone who knows what it's like to lose everything, to rise from the ashes. Nia's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing. The idea of leadership, of being the one to guide others, terrified her. She had always fought for others, always stood by the front lines, but never had she imagined standing as the one others looked to for guidance. She had failed before. What if she failed again? I'm not a leader, Nia muttered. I can't be. I've lost everything. Liam's gaze softened, and for the first time he smiled. A small, knowing smile that felt like a spark of warmth against the cold. You don't have to lead like the others did. You lead with strength, with the will to survive. And you lead by showing them that no matter how dark it gets, there's always a chance to start again. Nia's eyes fell to the ground, her mind a whirlwind of doubt. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that there was something left to fight for, that there was a purpose for her in all of this. But the fear, the pain of the past, held her back. Liam reached out, gently lifting her chin with his fingers, so she had to look him in the eyes. It's okay to be afraid, but don't let that fear control you. You have more inside you than you know, Nia. The people who need you, they'll see it, even if you can't. The world felt like it had shifted, tilting on its axis. The weight of his words crashed over her, and for the first time in what seemed like forever, Nia felt a spark of something other than grief. Hope, however fragile, began to flicker in her chest. I don't know if I can do this, she said quietly, her voice shaky. Liam smiled again, a reassuring, patient smile. You don't have to know. You just have to try. In that moment, something inside Nia stirred, a feeling she had long buried, a whisper of strength rising from the ashes of her past. Maybe she wasn't the end after all. Maybe this wasn't the final chapter of her story. Maybe, just maybe, she could still make a difference. The turning point. The cold wind howled through the cracked remnants of a long-forgotten city, carrying with it the scent of dust and decay. Nia stood at the edge of a broken building, looking out over the barren landscape. It was a strange sight. Empty, streets where children once played, buildings that had stood tall for centuries now reduced to rubble. But in the distance something caught her eye, a flicker of movement in the shadows. It was then that the reality of their situation hit her fully. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't just about finding a place to rest or keeping the cold at bay. They were being hunted. We've been tracked. Liam's voice broke through her thoughts, low and grim. I didn't want to believe it, but they've found us. Nia's breath caught in her throat as she turned to him. There was a familiar intensity in his eyes, one she hadn't seen in a long time. It wasn't fear, but something colder. Determination. They're not just looking for us, they're coming for everything, he said, his voice steady but full of weight. Your people's legacy, the last remnants of what they built, that's what they're after. Nia's heart thudded in her chest. She had known this moment would come, the moment when survival was no longer enough. But the reality of it felt overwhelming. How could she face what was coming? How could they possibly stand a chance against what was hunting them? "Who are they?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly despite herself. "Why do they want us?" "They're called the Eclipse," Liam said, his gaze darkening. "A faction that's been lurking in the shadows, waiting for the fall of your people. They want to erase any trace of your civilization. They want to rewrite history and ensure that the power your people once had never rises again." The weight of his words hung in the air like a storm about to break. Nia's pulse quickened as she looked around, trying to anticipate their next move. She could feel the tension building, the inevitability of the confrontation that was about to unfold. But a small part of her, buried deep down, knew that this was what she had been waiting for. This was the moment she had been preparing for, even if she hadn't realized it. "Then we'll stop them," Nia said, her voice stronger than she had expected. She turned to Liam, locking eyes with him. "If they think they can just erase everything we fought for, they're wrong. We'll show them what it means to face the last of the warriors." Liam's eyes softened, but there was a flicker of pride in them. "That's what I've been waiting to hear." The sudden sound of footsteps from behind them made both of them spin around, instinctively reaching for their weapons. But it was not an enemy that stood there. It was a girl. A young girl no older than 16 with wild eyes and a face full of dirt. She was trembling, and her hands were raised in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to hurt you," the girl said quickly, her voice panicked. I was sent to find you." Nia's heart skipped a beat. The girl had appeared out of nowhere, as if from the very ground they stood on. She looked like she had been running for days, her clothes torn, her hair tangled. But there was something in her eyes that reminded Nia of herself, of the desperation that came when you had nothing left to lose. "What do you want?" Nia asked, her voice cautious but not unkind. She didn't know who this girl was, but the look in her eyes told her that she wasn't a threat. "I was sent by the survivors," the girl said, her voice shaking with fear. They know you're here. They know what you're trying to do." "Survivors?" Nia echoed, confused. "What survivors?" The girl swallowed hard, stepping closer. "There are others like you, hidden. They've been waiting for you, waiting for someone to lead them, someone who can fight back. They need you, Nia. They need you to show them that there's still hope." The words hit Nia like a blow to the chest. Survivors? People still out there who had somehow survived the devastation? It felt impossible. How could she lead them? She had spent so long fighting alone, convinced that there was no one left to fight for. But now, with the girl's desperate eyes locked on hers, Nia felt something stir within her. "I can't lead them," she said, the doubt creeping into her voice. "I don't even know where to start. I barely know how to lead myself." Liam stepped forward, his expression firm. "You don't have to do it alone. You never have to do this alone again." The girl's voice trembled as she spoke. "We've been hiding for so long, waiting for someone to come, waiting for someone who can stop the eclipse. You're the one. The people, they believe in you." Nia felt the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders. She had been running from responsibility for so long, afraid of what it would mean to take on the mantle of leadership. But now, with the weight of these words sinking in, she realized that she didn't have a choice. The time had come for her to rise, to stop hiding and start fighting for something bigger than herself. "All right," Nia said, her voice steady now, her resolve hardening. "Show me the way." The girl nodded eagerly, and without another word, she turned and began to lead them deeper into the wasteland. As they followed her, Nia felt something inside her shift. There was no going back now. The fight was coming, and this time she wouldn't run from it. For the first time since everything had fallen apart, Nia felt the stirrings of a purpose. The weight of the past would not break her. This time she would fight. This time she would lead. And nothing, not the eclipse, not her doubts, could stand in her way. The final choice. The world was silent, its broken pieces stretching out beneath a sky that seemed to weep for the lost. The wind had quieted, leaving behind a heavy stillness as Nia stood at the edge of the battlefield, looking at the ruins of the city she had once called home. The final confrontation was at hand. The eclipse had arrived, their dark ships looming in the sky like predators ready to strike. Nia's heart pounded in her chest as she looked around at the small group of survivors who had gathered around her. These were the people she had been sent to find, the ones who had waited so long for a leader, for someone to guide them in this desolate new world. They were young and old, hardened by years of hiding, some with weapons in their hands, others with only hope in their eyes. But all of them were here now, gathered beneath her. The weight of it all pressed down on her. She wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. She was fighting for something greater, for the future of her people and their legacy. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Nia wasn't just a warrior, she was a symbol of the strength that had once defined her people and the strength they could find again. But as the eclipse forces advanced, a quiet fear began to rise within her. Could she really lead them? Could she do what was necessary, what her people needed her to do? She had been broken once, abandoned, and now the responsibility of their survival rested on her shoulders. It was a weight she wasn't sure she could bear. "Are you ready?" Liam's voice broke through her thoughts. He had been beside her every step of the way, his presence a constant reminder that she wasn't alone. He had believed in her when no one else had, but even his steady gaze couldn't calm the storm inside her. "I don't know if I can do this," Nia said, her voice tight with doubt. "I've failed before. I lost everything." Liam stepped closer, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "You didn't fail, Nia. You're still here. That's what matters. You've survived, and that's the strength you need to lead." Her eyes locked with his, and for a moment the world around them disappeared. The fear, the doubt, the weight of her past, all of it faded in the presence of this one simple truth. She wasn't alone. She didn't have to be the perfect leader, the perfect warrior. She just had to be herself. The sound of marching feet broke the moment, and Nia turned her gaze back to the horizon. The eclipse forces were advancing, their dark figures cutting through the smoke and ruins. They were coming, for everything she had left. But as she looked at the survivors standing beside her, something shifted inside. These people didn't need a perfect leader. They didn't need someone who had all the answers. They needed someone who believed in them, who was willing to fight alongside them, no matter the odds. "This is it," Nia said, her voice firm, now as she stepped forward, her hand gripping the weapon at her side. "We fight. We fight for the future. We fight for everything that's been taken from us." The survivors rallied around her, their faces set with determination. They were no longer the broken, lost souls who had been hiding in the shadows. They were a force united by the belief that they could make a stand, that they could rebuild, starting with this battle. Nia looked to the skies, her heart racing. The eclipse ships were descending, their weapons primed for destruction. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She wasn't running anymore. "They think they can erase us," Nia shouted, her voice carrying across the battlefield. "They think they can wipe us out, but they're wrong. We are the last of our kind, and we will not go quietly into the night." Her words echoed through the air, and with them came a wave of power, of unity. The survivors, no longer afraid, raised their weapons, their voices joining in a chorus of defiance. They were ready. The first shots rang out and the battle began. The eclipse forces advanced, but Nia and her people were ready. They fought not just for their lives, but for everything they had lost. Their homes, their history, their future. The battle raged on, each moment a test of their resolve. As the dust rose and the smoke swirled around them, Nia fought with a fire she hadn't felt in years. She moved with purpose, her strikes precise, her mind clear. For the first time in a long time, she felt alive. She was no longer the broken woman who had wandered the wasteland. She was a leader, a warrior. And nothing, not the eclipse, not her past, could stop her. The fight seemed endless, but with each passing moment, the tide began to turn. The eclipse forces, confident in their strength, began to falter. They hadn't anticipated the ferocity of the survivors, or the strength of Naya's leadership. They hadn't expected a broken people to rise up and fight for their future. And then, with a final powerful strike, the Eclipse forces began to retreat. Their ships, once hovering menacingly over the battlefield, turned and fled. Their defeat clear. Nia stood amidst the wreckage, her heart still racing but her chest swelling with pride. The survivors were victorious. The Eclipse had been defeated, and they had shown the world that no matter how dark it got, no matter how impossible it seemed, there was always a way forward. Always a chance for rebirth. As the dust settled and the cries of victory echoed around her, Nia looked to the sky. The battle was won, but the war for the future was just beginning. They had taken the first step toward rebuilding, toward finding a new purpose in a world that had long been broken. And for the first time, Nia knew. She wasn't just the last of her people. She was their future. And this time, she wouldn't let anyone erase it.